At 4 a.m., when the world sleeps and secrets move in shadows, a doorbell camera captured something that would expose a calculated evil. A man. Dragging something heavy. Wrapped in fabric. Struggling with the weight as he pulled it toward his car. Inside that bundle was his wife. This is the story of Shayla Cabrera. A woman who came to America with dreams of a better life. A mother who radiated warmth despite carrying unbearable burdens. A survivor who finally found the courage to leave, only to discover that sometimes, the most dangerous moment is when you try to escape. Before we dive into this heartbreaking case, if you're new to Crime 7, welcome to a community that seeks truth and justice for victims whose stories deserve to be told. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. And if this story moves you, leave a comment below. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. Shayla Cabrera arrived in the United States from Peru carrying a dream that millions of immigrants share, to build a better life for her family. At 33 years old, she had become exactly what she hoped to be. A loving mother to 3 young sons, ages 9, 6, and 4, living in Lancaster, California. Those who knew her described her as an unconditional friend, a loving mother, and a hard worker. Lancaster, a city in the high desert north of Los Angeles, is home to many immigrant families seeking the American dream. It's a place where people work multiple jobs, where communities form tight bonds, where neighbors know each other's names and watch out for each other's children. Shayla had found her place in this community, building a life brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. Shayla's friends in Lancaster saw her as someone who radiated warmth despite carrying burdens that would have crushed others. She worked tirelessly to provide for her 3 boys, maintaining the kind of positive energy that drew people to her. In her small apartment on Lancaster Boulevard, she created a home filled with love for her children, a sanctuary where laughter echoed through the rooms and hope seemed possible. The apartment wasn't large or luxurious. It was modest, like most working-class homes in the area. But Shayla had made it beautiful in the ways that mattered. Drawings from her sons decorated the refrigerator. Their toys were neatly organized in corners. Family photos lined the walls, capturing birthdays and holidays, moments of joy frozen in time. To anyone who visited, it looked like a happy home. A place where a family was building their future together. But there was something Shayla kept hidden beneath that bright smile. Something dark that only those closest to her knew about. Behind the facade of normalcy, behind the cheerful greetings and the tired but satisfied sighs after long workdays, there was a terror that lived in her home. Her husband, 36-year-old Josemar Cabrera Corno, was not the man he appeared to be to the outside world. To neighbors, he might have seemed like just another working father. To casual acquaintances, he was unremarkable. But behind closed doors, their marriage was anything but the happy family portrait it seemed. According to Shayla's mother, Helga Rosilo, who remained in Peru, her daughter had reported Josemar for domestic violence back in their home country. The abuse wasn't new. It hadn't started in America. It had been there from the beginning, a poison that infected their relationship from early on. The abuse had followed them across borders and oceans, a shadow that stretched thousands of miles and refused to let go. Distance couldn't stop it. A new country couldn't cure it. The violence traveled with them like a third presence in their marriage. It wasn't just Shayla who suffered. Helga stated that Shayla told her he hit her, mistreated her, and even slapped her youngest grandchild, who was just 3 years old. A child. A baby. Someone so small and defenseless that the thought of violence against them seems incomprehensible. But in homes where domestic violence exists, no one is safe. The violence spreads like wildfire, consuming everyone in its path. For years, Shayla endured physical and verbal abuse, trapped in a relationship that grew more dangerous with each passing day. The bruises she could hide with makeup. The emotional scars were buried deeper, invisible to the outside world but carved into her soul. Her friends watched helplessly as she struggled with an impossible decision: stay and endure the violence, or leave and risk losing her children to a man who repeatedly threatened to take them away from her if she tried to escape. This is the cruel calculus that so many victims of domestic violence must face. It's not as simple as just leave. When children are involved, when threats are made, when immigration status might be questioned, when financial dependence exists, when family pressure mounts, when hope flickers that maybe, just maybe, he'll change, the decision to leave becomes monumentally complex. Elizabeth Rousseau, one of Shayla's closest friends, explained the terrible bind Shayla found herself in. Shayla was just too scared because Josimar would always threaten to leave with the kids. Elizabeth believed that was her fear. If she did anything, he was going to kidnap the kids. Those threats had kept Shayla trapped for years, shackled by maternal love and paralyzing fear. What kind of man threatens to steal children from their mother? What kind of person uses a woman's love for her children as a weapon against her? These questions haunted Shayla's friends as they watched her suffer, wanting desperately to help but knowing that only Shayla could make the decision to leave. And they knew, as she knew, that leaving could be the most dangerous thing she ever did. But by the summer of 2025, something inside her had shifted. Maybe it was seeing her youngest child struck. Maybe it was the accumulation of years of abuse finally breaking through her hope. Maybe it was the realization that her sons were watching, learning, absorbing a terrible lesson about how men treat women. Whatever the catalyst, the years of abuse had worn away her hope that things would somehow improve, and staying had become more dangerous than leaving. By early August 2025, Shayla had reached her breaking point. Friends revealed that Shayla was in an abusive relationship and had asked her husband for a divorce. This wasn't a decision she made lightly. She understood the danger that came with leaving an abusive partner. Statistics paint a grim picture. The period when a victim leaves is often the most lethal phase of an abusive relationship. The moment when control slips away is when abusers become most dangerous. But staying had become impossible. The choice was between certain continued suffering and the hope, however slim, of freedom and safety. On August 9th, Shayla spoke with her parents in Peru and told them of her plans to leave Josimar and take their 3 young children with her. It was a conversation filled with both determination and fear. Across thousands of miles, over a phone connection that carried her voice back to the country she'd left behind, Shayla shared her plan with the people who had raised her, who had sent her to America with prayers and hopes for her success. She knew she needed to protect herself and her boys. She had made her decision, and she was moving forward with it despite the fear that must have been coursing through her veins. Shayla's mother says that the last time they spoke, her daughter told her she would be filing a report against Josimar in Lancaster. She was taking the legal steps. She was doing it the right way. She was seeking help from the system designed to protect victims like her. That conversation would be the last time she would ever hear her daughter's voice. The last "I love you." The last update about the grandchildren she cherished from afar. The last connection between a mother and daughter before everything ended. In the apartment on Lancaster Boulevard, tension filled every room like a suffocating fog. The air was thick with unspoken threats and building rage. Josimar knew what was coming. His wife, the woman he had controlled through fear and violence for so long, was planning to leave him. The mask of control he had worn for years was slipping, and beneath it lay something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. For men like Josimar, domestic violence isn't about anger. It's about power. It's about control. And when that control is threatened, when the victim dares to assert independence, the violence escalates. It becomes about ownership. If I can't have you, no one will. It's a twisted logic that has cost countless women their lives. Another friend tearfully recalled during a vigil, "This is really hard for me right now because we tried to get her out." The pain in those words is palpable. The guilt that survivors carry, wondering if they could have done more, said more, tried harder. The community had seen the warning signs. They had tried to help, but domestic violence cases are notoriously difficult to escape, especially when children are involved and the abuser makes credible threats. What Shayla didn't realize was that Josimar had no intention of letting her go. In his mind, if he couldn't control her anymore, then no one would have her. He had made his decision too. And his decision was final. August 9th was the last day Shayla Cabrera was seen alive. The last time she walked through her neighborhood. The last time she kissed her sons goodnight. The last time she looked at the sky or felt the California sun on her face. The last day of a life that should have stretched decades into the future. Inside the Lancaster apartment on August 10th, the unthinkable happened. While the world outside continued its normal rhythm, while neighbors went about their daily routines, while children played in nearby yards, something monstrous occurred behind those closed doors. The exact details of the murder remain sealed in court documents, but what investigators pieced together paints a picture of calculated violence. Prosecutors alleged that Josimar killed Shayla on August 10th at the Lancaster apartment where they and their 3 children lived. Special circumstances filed by the district attorney's office alleged that a knife was used in the killing. A knife. Close. Personal. Intimate violence that requires proximity, that requires looking at the person you're killing. This wasn't an impersonal act. This was deliberate. This was final. Somewhere in that apartment were 3 young boys, unaware that their mother was being murdered by their father. Perhaps they were sleeping. Perhaps they were in another room, watching television, playing with toys, existing in the innocent bubble of childhood while horror unfolded nearby. 3 innocent children who would have their childhood shattered, their mother stolen from them in an act of unthinkable cruelty. The trauma they would carry, the questions that would haunt them, the loss that would define their young lives, all set in motion in those terrible moments. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that he'll never see his mother again? How do you tell a 6-year-old that his father is the reason? How do you help a 9-year-old process the incomprehensible reality that the 2 people who created him destroyed each other, leaving him alone in the wreckage? After killing Shayla, Josimar had to hide what he had done. But instead of panic, instead of calling for help or breaking down, he moved with purpose. He wrapped her body carefully in a large piece of material, fabric that would later match exactly what investigators found in surveillance footage. He moved methodically, a man operating on autopilot and dark purpose rather than panic. Think about what that means. The deliberate wrapping. The careful concealment. The planning that went into what came next. This was a man who had already decided on his next steps, who had a plan for disposal and escape. Looking back, every choice he made that day revealed a chilling level of premeditation. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was execution followed by cover-up. In the early morning darkness of August 10th, still hours after the murder, Josimar began the process of covering up his crime. The apartment complex was quiet. Most residents were asleep, their windows dark, their doors locked against the night. The parking lot sat empty and still. He likely thought no one would notice what he was about to do. It was the perfect time, or so he believed, to move a body without witnesses. But someone did notice. A neighbor returning home from a night shift around 2:40 in the morning witnessed something that would later prove crucial to the investigation. Doorbell Marrera spotted Josimar cleaning out the trunk of the family's car in the middle of the night. She told reporters it was strange, that she worked those hours and knew there was nobody around at that time. Cleaning a trunk at that hour? She thought it was scary. Her instincts were right. Something was wrong. Something was deeply, terribly wrong. She didn't know it then, but she was watching a man prepare to dispose of his wife's body. She was witnessing the prelude to a body dump, the mechanical preparations of a killer trying to ensure he left no trace. What happened next was captured on camera, a moment frozen in time that would seal Josimar's fate. In an age where technology watches over us constantly, where doorbell cameras and security systems create a web of digital eyes, criminals can no longer count on darkness to hide their deeds. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's Ring doorbell camera recorded something that would become the centerpiece of a murder investigation. In the grainy video timestamped around 4 a.m. on August 10th, a figure can be seen struggling with a heavy wrapped bundle. The footage showed a man dragging something that clearly contained significant weight, pulling it across the ground with obvious effort. His body language showed strain. The object scraped along the pavement. The object was wrapped carefully in fabric to conceal what lay inside. What the camera captured was Shayla Cabrera dragging his wife's body from their apartment. The woman he had married. The mother of his children. The person who had trusted him with her life. Reduced to a bundle. Dragged like garbage. Treated with less dignity than one would show an animal. He loaded Shayla into the trunk of the family car and drove her to the Angeles National Forest, a vast wilderness area about an hour north of Lancaster. The forest, with its steep canyons and remote embankments, stretches for miles of rugged terrain. It's beautiful country, popular with hikers and nature lovers. But it had become, tragically, a dumping ground for those trying to hide terrible crimes. The same wilderness that offers solace to some offers concealment to others. Shayla navigated the dark roads leading into the forest, the only witness the silent trees and the burden in his trunk. The drive took him through sleeping towns and empty highways. An hour alone with what he had done. An hour to think, to reflect, to change course. But he didn't. He continued on his dark mission. When he found a suitable location, remote enough that discovery would be unlikely, he pulled Shayla's body from the trunk and threw her over the side of an embankment, discarding her among the brush and rocks like she meant nothing. Like the years they spent together, the children they raised, the vows they made, all of it meant nothing. In that moment, Shayla became nothing more to him than a problem to dispose of, evidence to hide. He then returned home to his 3 sons and began constructing the lies that would buy him time to escape. Time to cross borders. Time to put distance between himself and what he had done. 2 days after Shayla was murdered, on August 12, concerned friends reported her missing to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. 48 hours had passed. 48 hours of unanswered texts. Unreturned calls. A silence that was completely out of character for a woman who stayed constantly connected to her support network. When Shayla failed to respond to messages and calls, her friends knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. This wasn't like her. She always stayed in touch, especially when it concerned her children. A mother doesn't just disappear. A friend doesn't go silent. Something had happened, and they needed help. Deputies responded to the apartment complex on the 500 block of Lancaster Boulevard to take a missing person report. Standard procedure. A concerned citizen's report. But when authorities began asking questions, when they started pressing Shayla for details about his wife's whereabouts, his stories started to unravel like a cheap sweater, thread by thread, lie by lie. Shayla gave varying accounts of his wife's whereabouts to different people. It's a classic sign of deception, the inability to keep a story straight, the contradictions that pile up when someone is creating fiction rather than recounting truth. According to reports, he initially told authorities that his wife had been abducted by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. It was a calculated lie designed to explain Shayla's sudden disappearance while making it seem like she had been taken by federal authorities, something that would be difficult to immediately verify and might discourage further questions. In immigrant communities, ICE represents a genuine fear. The lie was designed to exploit that fear and create confusion. Later, he claimed she left with another man. A different story entirely. Now she wasn't taken, she left voluntarily. She abandoned her children and ran off with someone else. It was a narrative designed to paint Shayla as irresponsible, as someone who might just disappear. In a third account, he said she'd suffered an accident, but refused to provide any details. What kind of accident? Where? When? The vagueness was damning. Each lie contradicted the last, raising red flags for investigators and Shayla's family. Why would a concerned husband have 3 completely different explanations for where his wife was? The inconsistencies were glaring, almost insulting in their transparency. No truthful person has multiple versions of the same event. Memory might fail on details, but the basic story remains consistent. Detectives immediately suspected foul play. Shayla's friends told investigators about the years of domestic violence, about her plans to leave, about the threats Shayla had made to take the children. Combined with his constantly changing story, investigators knew they were looking at something far more sinister than a missing person case. This had all the hallmarks of a domestic violence homicide. They began looking into surveillance footage from the apartment complex, hoping to find any clue about what had happened to Shayla. What they discovered would transform everything. On August 13, during Lancaster Station's follow-up investigation, detectives discovered something that changed the entire trajectory of the case. They found surveillance footage from a neighbor's Ring camera that showed Josimar dragging a large object wrapped in material from the apartment complex. The damning video footage instantly transformed the investigation from a missing person case to a homicide investigation. There was no more speculation. No more waiting for Shayla to turn up. The evidence was clear, something terrible had happened, and Josimar was at the center of it. If you're finding value in the investigative work we do here on Crime 7, please take a moment to like this video. It helps the algorithm share these important stories with more people. And share your thoughts in the comments. What struck you most about Shayla's story? Your voices matter in keeping these conversations alive. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department's Homicide Bureau immediately took over the case. This was no longer a missing person. This was murder, and they needed to find Shayla's body to build their case. Detectives contacted the Crescenta Valley, Altadena, and Montrose Mountain search and rescue teams, who immediately began searching large areas of the Angeles National Forest. The forest covers over 700,000 acres of rugged mountain terrain. Finding a body there would be like finding a needle in a haystack, but investigators had to try. They coordinated multiple teams, used helicopters for aerial searches, and sent ground crews through the most remote areas. Somewhere in that vast wilderness, Shayla deserved to be found. She deserved to be brought home. Meanwhile, detectives worked in conjunction with the Mexican General Consulate and the Peruvian General Consulate, issuing alerts for Josimar Cabrera. International cooperation was essential now. They had learned something else deeply concerning. Josimar and the couple's 3 young children were also missing. Investigators believed Josimar had already fled the United States, likely taking his sons with him back to Peru. He had days of head start. He could be anywhere. On Saturday morning, August 16, shortly after 10 a.m., investigators received a call from the Montrose Mountain search and rescue team. They had found something. The rescue team reported they had spotted an object similar to the material that was seen being dragged by Josimar in the surveillance footage. The object was located over the side of an embankment in the Angeles National Forest, in a remote area about an hour's drive from the Lancaster apartment. Homicide detectives rushed to the scene. The location was difficult to access, requiring careful navigation down steep terrain. When they examined the material more closely, their worst fears were confirmed. The investigators responded to the scene and it was discovered that the material contained the body of Shayla Cabrera, who was pronounced deceased at the scene. She had been found. After days of searching, after hundreds of man-hours, Shayla had been located exactly where the evidence suggested she would be. The evidence was undeniable. The video showed Josimar dragging something from the apartment. That something was his wife's body. And now that body had been found exactly as the evidence suggested, discarded in a forest like she was nothing, left alone in the wilderness while her killer fled to another country. For those who loved Shayla, the confirmation was devastating. Their friend, their neighbor, the smiling mother who worked so hard for her children, had been murdered by the man who claimed to love her and discarded like trash in a remote forest. The hope that maybe, somehow, she was still alive evaporated in an instant. News of Shayla's death spread quickly through the Lancaster community. On the same day her body was found, investigators learned that the 3 Cabrera children had been located safe in Peru and taken into protective custody. At least the boys were safe, but their mother was gone and their father was a fugitive wanted for murder. That evening, loved ones held a vigil for Shayla outside Lancaster City Hall. Women and neighbors held signs reading "Justice for Shayla" and "Not one more." Candles flickered against the darkening sky. Tears fell. Stories were shared. People who had known Shayla spoke about her kindness, her dedication to her children, her strength in the face of impossible circumstances. And Shayla's memory was honored by a community that refused to let her death be in vain. As the vigil candles flickered in the California evening, Shayla Cabrera was thousands of miles away, having fled to Peru in a desperate attempt to escape justice. But justice has long arms, and borders don't protect killers forever. Lieutenant Michael Modica told the New York Times that Shayla was detained in both Mexico and Peru after entering the countries by land. In each instance, he was released because he had not yet been charged with a crime. Without formal charges filed in the U.S., authorities in Mexico and Peru had no legal grounds to hold him. It was a frustrating reality of international law enforcement. Peruvian authorities questioned him at the airport in Lima and took the children into protective custody, but couldn't detain Shayla himself. Peru's foreign ministry announced that it had repatriated the children back to Los Angeles via Mexico City to be reunited with their maternal grandmother. At least Shayla's mother would have her grandsons, though the reunion was bittersweet, marked by grief and trauma. Meanwhile, prosecutors in Los Angeles County prepared to file formal charges. They were building a case that would bring Shayla back to face American justice. On Thursday, August 21st, homicide investigators presented their case to the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. The evidence was overwhelming: the surveillance footage, the inconsistent statements, the body found in the location predicted by the evidence, the history of domestic violence. Shayla Cabrera Corno was charged with one count of murder with allegations of using a knife as a deadly weapon. The next day, the district attorney's office filed an extradition arrest warrant. District Attorney Nathan Hochman issued a statement: "The allegations against this man are horrific and we will do everything possible to bring him to justice, back under our jurisdiction to be held accountable." An Interpol red notice was issued for Shayla's arrest, marking him as a wanted fugitive across the globe. If convicted as charged, he faced a possible maximum sentence of 26 years to life in prison. For days, Shayla remained at large in Peru, but the walls were closing in, and he knew it. The international pressure was mounting. The evidence was overwhelming. There was no escape, only the delay of inevitable consequences. On August 27, 2025, he turned himself into the Interpol headquarters in Lima, Peru. Peru's National Police Force announced the surrender with a video showing him handcuffed, wearing an Interpol insignia on his shirt, flanked by law enforcement officers. The man who thought he could escape justice, who fled across borders and abandoned his children, now faced the consequences of his actions. Local authorities are in the process of extraditing him back to California to stand trial. The extradition process could take several months, but Shayla will remain in Peruvian custody until he can be returned to the United States. And when he returns, he will face a courtroom, a jury, and the full weight of the American justice system. Shayla Cabrera's story is more than a true crime case. It's more than statistics and court documents and surveillance footage. It's a reminder of the hidden epidemic of domestic violence that claims lives every single day. Behind closed doors, in apartments and houses across every neighborhood, there are people suffering in silence, trapped by fear, by threats, by the impossible choice between safety and losing their children. Every year in the United States, domestic violence kills thousands of people. Most of them are women. Most of them die at the hands of intimate partners. Most of them, like Shayla, tried to leave. The period when a victim leaves or attempts to leave is statistically the most dangerous time. That's when control is lost. That's when abusers become killers. Shayla tried to leave. She found her courage. She made her plans. She told her family. She was going to file a report. She did everything she was supposed to do. And still, she was killed. Her 3 sons will grow up without their mother. They'll grow up knowing their father took her from them. They'll carry scars that therapy and time may soften but never fully erase. And Shayla, a woman who came to America with dreams, who worked tirelessly for her children, who radiated warmth despite carrying unbearable burdens, is gone. Her story must not be forgotten. Her name must not fade into statistics. Shayla Cabrera deserved better. She deserved to see her sons grow up. She deserved to live free from fear. She deserved justice. And while justice in a courtroom may eventually come, it will never bring her back. It will never give those 3 boys their mother. It will never undo the violence or erase the trauma. Justice is important, necessary even, but it's a poor substitute for a life. If Shayla's story has impacted you, I want to ask you to do something important. Subscribe to Crime 7 if you haven't already, because every subscription helps us continue telling the stories of victims who deserve to be remembered. Share this video. Let Shayla's story reach people who need to hear it. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts, your grief, your anger, or your hope. And if you know someone who might be in a situation like Shayla's, reach out. Sometimes just knowing someone cares can make all the difference. This is Crime 7, where we seek truth, demand justice, and honor the memories of those taken too soon. Until next time, stay safe, and never stop fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. Rest in peace, Shayla Cabrera. Your light was extinguished far too soon, but your story will continue to shine as a reminder that we must do better, that we must protect the vulnerable, that we must never stop speaking the names of those we've lost. Your 3 sons will grow up knowing their mother was loved, that she fought for them, that she tried to protect them. They will know that a community mourned you, that strangers across the world heard your story and were moved by your struggle. They will know that you mattered. And that matters more than you could ever know.